Alright, I'm finally back at it. I was supposed to put this story out earlier, but life and a little dental situation got in the way. So thank y'all for being patient. But now that Mardi Gras 2026 has passed, there's been a lot of discussion. Again, headlines, debates, conversations about racism, satire, imagery, all of it. And just like every year, it gets talked about for a few days and then it fades until next season when something happens again. So instead of arguing about feelings, let's talk about facts. Today, Mardi Gras looks a lot more unified in certain moments. There's the Lundi Gras celebration at Waldenburg Park, where the King of Rex and the King of Zulu meet publicly. It's festive, it's symbolic, and it feels like harmony. But that's actually a recent tradition. For most of Carnival history, the royal pairing people recognized wasn't Rex and Zulu. It was Rex and Comus. Rex opened Carnival, and Comus closed Mardi Gras night. That tradition lasts until the early 1990s. So to understand why that mattered, we have to go back. You see, New Orleans celebrated Mardi Gras since the 19th century. It grew out of a Catholic tradition, masking, and street celebration. But early on, it wasn't structured the way people think of it today. In 1857, the Mystic Crew of Comus rolled its first parade and introduced a more organized format: themed floats, torchlit night processions, and a formal ball afterward. Crowds grew, visitors started traveling in, and the presentation became more elaborate and more theatrical. They helped shape what eventually became known as one of the biggest free parties on earth. Comus came first. Rex was established later, and in 1872, they became the public-facing King of Carnival. Rex represented the daytime spectacle, and Comus represented the elite, private closing ritual at night. For decades, those two crews symbolized Carnival royalty. And during much of that period, black participation in major white crews was not a reality. Black men were often visible as flambeau carriers, literally lighting the way for the floats, but not as members shaping policy or power. Black carnival culture would later organize in its own way, including the formation of Zulu in the early 20th century. But Zulu was not historically recognized by white carnival leadership as a king of carnival. That recognition is part of a modern change. So when we talk about tradition, we have to be honest about what that tradition looked like. Now, during Reconstruction, which was the period when black citizens were gaining political power after slavery, Comus would use parade themes that use satire to mock that progress. So when they say things like it's just satire, you gotta understand where that satire comes from. Those images and programs are archived. They still exist. Some of them are still in museums. Historians also note that many businessmen and civic leaders that were involved in the elite carnival circles, like Comus, they moved in the same social networks as men active in the White League. Now, the White League was a white supremacist organization formed to resist Reconstruction and suppress black political power. In other words, they were just upset that black people had political power at all. In fact, they were upset that black people had any power. They are part of what I call the Big Three of hate. If you've been watching my videos, you know that the White League is responsible for the Battle of Liberty Place, which was basically a violent 3-day insurrection on the New Orleans government. The White League temporarily seized control of the city and state house. They captured the governor and all. They were tired of blacks being involved in leadership, and they weren't leaving until things went back to the old way. This event ended Reconstruction in Louisiana. And these are some of the same members of Comus. Now those KKK-looking costumes and guys riding on horses all make sense now. And coincidentally, Comus is also credited with helping establish the spelling of crew with the letter K. Now, I don't know whether that was simply theatrical branding or whether certain groups in that era just had a fondness for using that letter. But that's neither here nor there. You can draw your own conclusions. Now fast forward to 1991. Councilmember Dorothy May Taylor introduced the city ordinance prohibiting discrimination based on race, religion, and gender in carnival crews. She said crews using city services to hold their parades should have membership policies that didn't discriminate. They were using public streets, using the police for protection, and public sanitation services for cleanup. And they shouldn't be discriminating against the very taxpayers that supported those services. And it wasn't just blacks. Public hearings revealed that popular crews while also discriminating against women, gay people, Jewish people, and Italians. So rather than publicly denounce racism, some crews decided they would rather quit than to comply, and Comus was one. They stepped away from the route and never returned to public parading. They kept their ball private, exclusive, membership largely undisclosed. And that decision marked the end of the Rex Comus royal era. And this was 1991. That wasn't that long ago. Can you imagine throwing away years and years of rich history just because you were being forced to say you aren't racist? Whew, that's heavy. Talk about standing on business. Now, some crews gave in, but not Comus. So when people act shocked every year when racial controversies resurface, maybe the better question isn't how is this still happening? Maybe the better question is whether we've really looked at the full history. You can celebrate the pageantry, you can love Mardi Gras, but you can't be surprised by a pattern you refuse to recognize. History doesn't disappear just because it makes us uncomfortable, and that's exactly why we have to learn it. Remember to comment, like, and share, and subscribe for more stories that they won't put in your textbook. Peace.